This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we're fortunate to have a distinguished guest. Her name is Beena Sarwar. She's a Pakistani journalist, filmmaker, and a peace activist who is currently based in Boston, Massachusetts. She focuses on human rights, media, gender equality, democracy, and India and Pakistan relationship. She served at the Carr Center for Human Rights at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where I serve on the board. Thank you, Beena, for coming to our show. It's wonderful to see you and get to know you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Beena, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who's Beena Sarwar? And you seem to wear many hats, such as journalist, filmmaker, artist. So my question is, how do you juggle and how do you do so many things and be effective? And also talk a little bit about being the Pakistani editor of the Aman Ki Asha. I may have not pronounced it correctly, but as I understand in English, it's called Hope for Peace.
Yes, so thank you. That's a lot of questions in terms of identity. Well, I think all of us have multiple identities. We don't just have one identity. So I started out wanting to be an artist, and then I went into journalism as an intern. And the more I got into journalism, the less I did, the less I painted or drew. But I still do that every now and then. And then I, like you said, I went into filmmaking. But journalism and filmmaking are very related. And then because of my work with human rights, during the time I lived in Lahore and was fortunate to have mentors like Asma Jahangir and Ayer Rahman, and Dr. Mubashir Hassan, and they pulled me into the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan and the India-Pakistan peace activism in 1993. So I just find all of these things very related and connected. And Aman Ki Asha was started in 2010 by the Times of India and the Jung Group of Pakistan, the two largest media groups. So I edit, there's a website, amankiasha.com, and I edit that and I curate that. So I hope that answers your question. It's a lot of different, it's all connected. For me, it's all connected, yeah.
So you are interconnected. So tell us a little bit about the South Asian Peace Action Network, also known as, if I can pronounce it correctly, is SAPAN, S-A-P-A-N, its missions, its goals and objectives, and its future plan. I'd like you to shine a bright light on the peace agenda and friendship between India and Pakistan. You want India and Pakistan to join hands together. And how do you go about from this organization to share the knowledge and the business and ideas as a part of this initiative? And who are the members of these organizations and how do you get funded?
Oh my gosh, so many questions. Well, right now we have no funding at all.
Okay.
Aman Ki Asha has no funding either. We are constantly accused, I'm constantly accused of taking money from India and wherever, but I basically am a freelancer and I hustle for a living like all freelancers.
That's always a challenge, Beena.
Yes, and I do other things like teach and edit and things like that. So we don't have any funding right now. SAPAN, and you did pronounce it quite correctly, SAPAN is the South Asia Peace Action Network, is, as its name implies, it's a network. It's not an organization, it's not an NGO, it's a coalition of many organizations that have come together. And if you go to our founding charter, it lists the organizations, it lists the initial endorsements, which include from people like Amartya Sen, Khushi Kabir in Bangladesh, Salima Hashmi in Pakistan, Kanak Dixit in Nepal, Kanak Mani Dixit in Nepal, and many other people who have been involved in all kinds of in peace building and in their own fields, excel in their own fields. Dr. Sen, as you know, is a Nobel laureate in economics. And he was one of the first to sign on to our founding charter, which basically calls for freedom of trade and travel and tourism and in the South Asian region. And like the EU, what we're looking at is something like, if it's a region where people are connected. When I was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard at journalism, I came to know other Nieman Fellows. And soon after me, there was a Nieman Fellow from Kerala in India and a Nieman Fellow from North Waziristan in Pakistan. And they had nothing in common in terms of language, food, culture. South India has a very different culture than North India, and North Waziristan has a very different culture than the Indo-Gan. These are both very outside the Indo-Gangetic belt, as we may call it. And yet they were the best of friends. They connected over. They liked each other's food, music, Bollywood is a big connector, poetry, things like that. So our culture, brings us together, even if we don't share the exact same cultures. Oh. So we want the region to be in peace and harmony. These are two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. And this is impossible to the kind of ridiculous things they do with each other's citizens who inadvertently cross the border, the way that the prisoners we treat our own prisoners so atrociously. If there's a cross-border prisoner, that prisoner is like in hell. And there are many, many stories of people who've been found years later on both sides, even dead, but even when they die in each other's prisons, it takes months to repatriate the bodies. It's inhumane. It's ridiculous. It's juvenile, and they need to get over their egos and cooperate. Because also, sorry, just my last point is the cross-border trade. The regional trade could be in billions between each other, and yet we trade via Dubai and Middle East.
That's a good point you made. So you're trying to bind these people together because they have a shared heritage and shared history, and their bonds are stronger than the differences that too often drives them apart, correct?
Yes.
So considering the friction between India and Pakistan as you described, how far have you been successful to further people-to-people agenda in terms of peace agenda? Do you have any success story that you can share with our audience? And what do you need to do to bring the India and Pakistan together to pursue the common good and healing the wounds of the division?
Gosh, Frank, you asked so many questions in one question. So there's so many.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're really smart.
I think we have to look at peace as a process and not as an event. Just like democracy is a process and not an event. And there's a lot of things happening in the process that don't make the headlines, but that are so important. They include things like, successes include, repatriation of prisoners. Many of them have made headlines, many of them have not. We have managed to, at times of extreme tension, as one of my mentors, Dr. Mubashir Hassan, said, that they allowed the people-to-people contact to continue. The governments allowed people to meet or have conventions, joint conventions from the platform of the Pakistan India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy, which was founded in 1994 or 95. And so even in times of tension, they've allowed them to meet. Sometimes they've allowed cricket matches to take place and given visas to thousands of Indians and Pakistanis to go across. And when they have those people who've gone across have found so much hospitality and love and curiosity, not hostility. So the hostility is at the government level. It's not at the people level. Like another late mentor, Asma Jahangir, used to say, if you open the visas between India and Pakistan, there will be a flood on both sides. Let the people meet. So Milne Do is a slogan that I use it for the title of a documentary film I made on Kashmiris that have been separated by this very contentious border between India and Pakistan. And one of the main things that the Pakistani People's Forum for Peace and Democracy, the PIPFPD, in its very first joint convention, said that Kashmir should not be treated as a matter of real estate between India and Pakistan, but a matter of the lives and aspirations of the Kashmiri people, whose views and wishes must be taken into account in any dialogue about their future. So I think one of the successes is that this idea has percolated into official discourse. And of course, we have setbacks, and it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But 2 steps forward, 1 step back is still a step forward. And we're inching, and one of the things that gives me great hope is the young people. We are a young region. More than 30–40% of the people in South Asia, maybe even more, I don't have the figures, but they're under 30 years old. In SAPAN, in Aman Ki Asha, in PIPFPD, we're seeing young people coming forward, taking leadership, really connecting with each other, students. Like I remember when these students at IIT Bombay, Mumbai, they wanted to have a connection with the students in Pakistan. So I helped to connect them, and they did joint science exhibitions together with students. And like you just let them meet, and then but the governments create so many. And this is, I'm talking India, Pakistan, but it affects all of South Asia. And that is one of the things behind SAPAN, is that you have to take India, Pakistan, not just as an India, Pakistan butting heads kind of a thing. You have to see it in the regional context. They are making lives miserable, bringing the poverty levels, increasing poverty levels in the whole region because of their ego-driven policies.
Very well said. So there are a lot that unite them, there are little that disunite them. So we need to make sure that they can promote trade and commerce and investment with the two countries as well, which is what your motivations are, which is what you're trying to do. They are the same people. Unfortunately, they're divided by distance. So just like you are, you live in Boston, and how do you ensure to chart the future course in South Asian politics as you're divided by distance, but you are linked by common goals and common cause and common commitment?
So, the thing is that all we can do, all we who don't have the ears of the policymakers, we are not a think tank. I'm not a think tank person. I'm a journalist. I go by what, I talk to people, and I'm going by my discussions and, like ordinary people, not just people who have access to internet. Well, right now, of course, we're all online, but all we can do is just keep, like the people who are against peace, who I think there's something that nobody talks about, which is the weapons industry. Who's supplying? Who's making the money? We always taught in journalism, like look for the money trail. Where's the money? Okay, who's funding? Who benefits from conflict? Who benefits from war? It's the weapons industry. It's the politicians who can try sort of like keep the people apart. It's the military establishments. Otherwise, if you think about the people, if you just let people be, let them live, that's
in peace
all
and harmony. In peace and harmony.
Yes, but you can't have that without letting people meet and talk. Yeah, you have to have a dialogue. As Manishankar Iyer said, dialogue has to be uninterrupted and uninterruptible. You can't just say, you can't be like kids and say, oh, I'm not playing. Oh, he started it. Please grow up. And each side, sorry to interrupt, but and again, coming back to India, Pakistan, each side acts as if they are pure as driven snow and everything wrong is on the other side. That it's the other side, the blame game, the finger pointing, the accusations. This is so juvenile.
Yeah.
Look at what's wrong in your own country. Right. As we say, apne gireban mein jhanko, look inside yourself. And speaking of, you mentioned like Obama said, like be the change. You be the change.
Be the change. Very well said.
Gandhi said this. Nelson Mandela said this. And I want to just add one little point, which is that in Islam, the greater jihad is the struggle within. It's not fighting. It's not arms and ammunition and power. The greater jihad is the struggle within. And the concept of quote unquote jihad at the international level was started, I'm sorry to say, by the USA and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan during the 1980s war in Afghanistan to combat the USSR in the then Cold War. And we are still paying the price for that trajectory that was started then.
I want to shift the gears and talk about your thoughts on the role of the media in South Asia. As you know, the cornerstone and the pillar of a democracy is freedom of faith, freedom of press, freedom of expressions, and respect for human rights. Do you believe that the South Asian country adhere to this kind of pillars of democracy? And how do you go about to secure and ensure the freedom of press and freedom of religion and freedom of faith in India and Pakistan? As you know, Thomas Jefferson, as a part of the First Amendment, as a part of our Constitution, which was the amendment to the Bill of Rights, put freedom of press and freedom of faith as a part of our constitution. Do that kind of things exist in India and Pakistan as well?
I mean, you know the answer to your question. The very short answer is no.
Okay.
How important is it? Tremendously important. Because as another friend and colleague in India, Rita Manchanda, once said, that the narrative created by the mainstream media gives the impression as if there is no option but conflict. That is not true. If you allow, and again, if you allow journalists to do their work, which is not happening, particularly in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, journalists are being picked up, they're being detained, they're being killed, they're being tortured. In Pakistan, they're barging into people's houses and beating them up, taking pot shots at them while walking in the park. In Bangladesh and India, again, charges of sedition, things like that. So we are not ambassadors. Journalists are not ambassadors. We are not. And then they throw national interest at us. Please don't tell us about national interest. Focus on providing food security and security of employment and security of housing to the people. That is real security. So stop telling us, giving us lessons on patriotism and putting charges of sedition on us when we don't go by your so-called national narrative and your so-called security interest.
So Beena, how do you say when India touts is the largest democracy in the world? That's what they say. But if the cornerstone of democracy, of any democracy, is freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of faith, freedom of expression, and respect for human rights. And as we have seen so many instances, as you described, a lot of people have been killed, journalists. And journalists are target of the government to suppress their freedom and to suppress the freedom of press. And then how do you go about touting yourself as the largest democracy in the world, which is what India says?
So they can say what they want. And again, like I said, democracy is a process, not an event. And I think, and I wrote this in an essay I wrote just about the time Modi came into power, in a book it's an anthology called Making Sense of Modi's India. And what I wrote in my essay, I was the only Pakistani to contribute to that anthology. And what I was like, how am I going to write this? Because I don't want to offend people because I disagree with his policies so strongly. But again, I don't want to go into personalities. I'm talking about issues. So I wrote about what India can learn from Pakistan in terms of what happens when you inject religion into politics. We've had that during the Zia years, particularly. We're still paying the price for that. And I said, and what Pakistan can learn from India when you let the democratic political process continue. So democracy is not just like casting your vote. There's a process. It's a process of handing over power. It's a process of accountability. So right now we are seeing very little of that in India, but I do have faith in the people of India, my friends and comrades in India, the way they are fighting back. It is inspirational, the way that people are. And again, that is, in Pakistan, you'll have the headlines about the atrocities and the what's wrong with India, which is absolutely, it should be highlighted, what happened in Kashmir. But what they are not highlighting is how many Indian citizens went to Kashmir for fact-finding missions and spoke out and are facing sedition charges or threats of sedition charges for raising their voice for the Kashmiris. How many Indians who are non-Muslims are doing that? And similarly in Pakistan, how many people are speaking up for, so the news, like they say, no news is bad news, no news is good news, right? Like when it's bad news, it makes a headline, but the good news, which is the process, that doesn't get into the media. And I just want to add one more thing here is that we are also seeing a lot of corruption in the profession of journalism. We're seeing a lot of people who are calling themselves journalists. They are writing for big newspapers or have big hosting big TV talk shows with millions of viewers and in many of the channels, but they are not following the ethics of journalism. And I think we have to make a distinction. The ethics of journalism include giving everybody a fair hearing. It includes multi-source confirmation, at least 2 sources of confirmation for any information, not just calling somebody a traitor and or saying that they are corrupt without getting proof. It includes sort of giving a voice to the voiceless, not just what the politicians are saying. And we are not seeing, and again, that percentage of journalists, I think, is a very small percentage. I have to say, I was just doing some training for journalists around Pakistan in small towns and cities and small, like mid-level or early career journalists, and I was so inspired by their commitment and their how hard they work and against what odds they work. And I'm sure it's the same in India. The journalists whose names you don't hear, who are not uchalofied, as we say, those journalists.
Let me shift my gear and talk about your writing that I've observed. An inclusive and democratic India is good for democracy in Pakistan, just as an inclusive democratic Pakistan is good for India. I want you to elaborate that, what you're really saying. In order to have a vibrant, plural, and successful democracy, we need to embrace the richness of religious diversity, and survival of India and Pakistan rests on the foundation of inclusive democracy and equitable society and tolerance. And I also thought you said we have to have a unity over division and hope over fear, and we need to wipe out the winds of hatred and bigotry.
Wow, I wrote some inspiring words there.
Well, some of the words are mine also. So,
okay.
But I want
you wrote some
because I'm a columnist also.
Yes. So yeah, that's. I mean, I think you kind of answered your own question in a way.
Not quite.
Yes. So I want to quote my friend Rajdeep Sardesai, who's a well-known journalist in India, and he came to the SARC summit in Islamabad many years ago. I was with GeoTV at the time, and we had a discussion. And the chief of the then chief of the Jamaat-e-Islami was there, and Rajdeep said to him that basically the same thing that I said in my essay that I mentioned, that you people are two sides of the same coin. Your religious extremists in Pakistan and religious extremists in India are two sides of the same coin, or as we say in Urdu, ek hi theli ke chhatte batte. So they feed off each other. So which is why they want this. And I just want to. There was a woman I met from Australia who was doing a PhD thesis that she eventually abandoned because she got threatened in Australia, and she's a white woman, not Indian at all. She was doing her thesis on this is back in the, I think, early 2000s. This was 2000 or something, because I was still in Lahore last year before I left Lahore. And she talked about how the RSS in Bombay, or the VHP, I forget which, were actually showing video cassettes of the Jamaat-e-Islami's training to their cadres, and impressing upon them the power of one. Because India, as you know, is a pantheon of gods. It's a multi gods. So there isn't one. So since then, you've seen that emphasis on the one God in India, the privileging one God above the others. For example, Ram, and the others being treated as lesser gods, whereas in India that was not the case before. And so they've used that kind of thing. So they learn from each other. They pick up on each other's tactics, and they're very happy to be part of the blame game and finger pointing and accusations, because that's what helps them to keep their own constituencies intact. Because if you start seeing the other as human, then you stop behaving to them as if they are not human.
So you need to, what you say, so we need to reject the voices that seek to divide us. That's what you're saying.
Sorry, we need to
reject the voices.
I'm not, because like I keep saying to people who work with me, they got to do what they got to do, and we got to do what we got to do. I'm not going to focus on their voices and spend time and energy rejecting them. They can go stew in their own whatever. When they get abusive to me, sometimes I'll reply to them and say, I really feel sorry for the women in your life if this is how you talk, and I'm so sorry for your mother, is this how she raised you? So there needs to be some basic civility and respect for each other. I will hear anybody out. I don't care what he might be extreme, rabid, right-wing from either, as long as he has respect. And I'm saying he because most of them happen to be male, which is not always the case. There are many women also, but in general. So I think that we have to focus on our work, and let them, do what they're doing. We can't be focusing on rejecting them.
Before we close our conversation, I want you to tell me a little bit about, as we all know, that you firmly and strongly believe in the role of women in building peace between India and Pakistan. Do you believe that India and Pakistan cannot achieve its fullest potential unless women are active participants in shaping the future and shaping the peace and economic growth?
Short answer, yes.
Pardon?
I believe that. The short answer is yes, I believe that. I mean, you have to, and I think again, I'll quote Asma Jahangir and Nirmala Deshpande from the India side. When at the height of the Kargil war, that's right after the Kargil war, it was the women with their peace bus, who crossed on either side, and they reclaimed the traditional symbols of feminine weakness, the bangles and the dupattas or the chunnis, and they exchanged those as symbols of strength and reclaiming, like we say in India and Pakistan, oh, he's so weak, he's wearing bangles. Well, guess what? We are strong. We are strong. Those are not handcuffs. Those are bangles. And we like the sound that they make, and we like the colors. And we are not going to fall into this hyper masculine way of interacting. And the way that women interact tends to be a lot more cooperative, a lot more humane, a lot more compassionate and empathetic, which is, again, not to say, I mean, people like Aya Rahman, and people like some of my mentors and people I've worked with, people I work with even now, including young people, are particularly, like, young men are really, as they say, woke, and really trying very hard to, to access the feminine side of themselves. And I think that when people do that, I think we're going to, we will see that the change is happening. Okay. And the reason why these people are so vehement in how they attack us is because they're so scared. They are so scared, and bullies are always cowards. We know that. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Beena, for being here. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all you do to make a meaningful and profound difference in people's lives. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. Thank you for watching.